Welcome to Complexity Made Simple. My name is Paul Allen, and before we get into today's video, well, I'm just going to remind you the 3 books that are on sale. Drink tea and read the paper. If you're a green belt and a black belt and you want simple instruction on how to apply your skill, design of experiments for 21st century engineers, and finally a statistical process control for small batch production. They are all available from lulu.com and the links are in the video below. Welcome to the latest video, and in this video newsletter what we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at a set of recommended design of experiments on the Minitab menu. So we are going to look at recommended design of experiments, recommended DOEs Minitab. Okay, now then, one of the problems with using Minitab gives you choice. It doesn't give you advice. And that's an issue because the choice is huge. So for example, if you look here, if we go stat DOE, and of course you get this list here. We've got the Taguchi, we've got response surface, we've got factorials, we've got screening DOEs. And if you go and investigate what's behind each one of these menus, there is a huge list of DOEs that you could choose. Now choice is fantastic, but when you're faced with 300 DOEs, and especially when it's early in your career with using design of experiments, you start to go, okay, which one do I use? Now personally, I don't use Minitab. I believe there's better software than Minitab. It's cheaper, it's simpler, it's easier to use, it doesn't get in your way, and it's fantastic. And it's called DOE Pro. Now if you look at my DOE Pro menu, the one thing about DOE Pro, it does give me choice, but it also gives me advice. So for instance, if I drop the menu down here, create design, and one of the choices says computer aided menu. And if I click computer aided, what that does is it gives me a list of recommended experiments. So there's 2 types of experiment as far as DOE Pro is concerned, 2 level and 3 level. So if I click on the radio button, I get a set of DOEs recommended to me. If I click on 3 level, I get a set of DOEs recommended to me. What I want to show you is where those recommended DOEs can be found in Minitab. So let's start by just saying, look, as far as I'm concerned, you've got DOEs, and pretty simply, I'm just going to talk about 2 types. We're going to talk about 2 level experiments, and we're going to talk about 3 level experiments. Now actually, when I say 3 level, I mean more than 2 levels. It's a catch-all term as far as I'm concerned to mean more than 2 levels effectively. One of the problems with Minitab is when it says 3 level, it actually means that. It means you tested in 1 place, in 2 places, in 3 places, and therefore you can see the curve. If you test more than that, so if you tested for instance 5 times across that curve, it wouldn't call that a 3 level DOE, even though to me it's a 3 level DOE. So I'm keeping it simple. I'm just going to give you a list for 2 level, and I'm going to give you a list for 3 level. Now the first thing to say is job 1 on both screening. So both of them have a screening methodology. Screening DOE of choice is the Taguchi L12. Screening over here is the Taguchi L18. So where are these found? Well, as you would expect, they are on the Taguchi menu. Now with all of these, how do you make a choice? Recommended. How do you make a choice? The basic choice is, how many factors do you have? How many dials are you going to play with? So another word for variables, for factors rather, is inputs. You could also call them variables. A simple thing to say is, how many settings? How many changes are you going to make? Time, temperature, pressure, etc. Okay, so how many of those have you got? So with all of this, that's how we're going to choose. So anyway, the L12, let's show you where it is on the menu. Stat, DOE, Taguchi. Now here's why I mentioned the number of factors, because there is a little menu here. Look, there's a little drop down menu. How many variables do you have to test? Now let's say we're going to test 7. Okay, so if I put 7 in that window there, choose it, and then go designs, you can see it gives me a few choices, but one of the choices is the L12. So that's where you find the L12. You choose Taguchi, the number of factors. You can see also I've chosen 2 level, by the way, so the radio button, look, is still in the 2 level. We put the number of factors in, and now I can set up the Taguchi design, I can run the Taguchi design, and I can analyze it. So what's the screening DOE for? Well, it's for 6 to 11 factors. 6 to 11 factors. Okay, so there's the screening DOE on the Minitab menu. Now the L18. Now the L18 is more difficult to find. Stat, DOE, Taguchi. Now even though we're saying it's a 3-level DOE, if I change the radio button to 3 level, I won't find this. I have to put mixed level. The reason being that one of the variables in the L18 is only at 2 levels and the rest of the pattern is at 3 levels. So in order to see the L18 on the menu, I have to ask for mixed. And then if I do the same thing, look, 7 variables, choose that, drop the designs down, I get a choice of the L18. Now there's an awful lot of choices here, but you can see the L18 is sort of halfway down the list. There is the L18. Now what are we screening? There's the L18 is up to 7 or 8 variables. 7 variables if you're going to test them in 3 places. The 8th variable, which would be the first column of the pattern, is only tested in 2 places. So if you want to test machine 1 versus machine 2, and then you want to test all the variables on machine 1 and machine 2, then the first variable is machine 1 and machine 2. The other 7 would be time, temperature, pressure, etc. There's your screening DOEs. So Taguchi, mixed level though, mixed level, and then choose the number of factors. So that's where we find the screening DOEs. Then what we come down to is the factorials. Okay. So these are modeling DOEs. Okay, now where do I find that? Well, I've used the word factorial. Now there is a factorial menu in Minitab. So you would go stat, DOE, factorial. And then again, look, I've got some choices of a factorial choice. But if I stick to 2 level, because that's where we are over here on the whiteboard, 2 level DOE. If I choose the number of factors, Now the DOEs we're going to choose are, if we have 2 factors, we'll pick a full factorial. 3 factors, full factorial. So in both those cases, if I change the number in the number of factors, then I go looking for the menu, it offers me full factorial as one of the choices. 4 factors, it's a full factorial. When we get to 5 variables though, I choose the half fraction. So at 5 we go with the half fraction. Okay, so this one is a 16 run DOE. This one is also a 16 run DOE. So we're trying to save some pain here when we get to 5. So look, over here on my 2 level side, you can see, look, how many factors do you have? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, there is a nice menu for doing 2 level DOEs. And I recommend you start on this side of the menu always. Your process really isn't that complicated, honestly. People always think we've got more complex models than we really have. Start here. You can find these on the factorial menu. You can find this one on the Taguchi menu. That's where you find the recommended DOEs. That's where you find the recommended DOEs. And then finally, the one thing I'll say is it doesn't recommend a sample size. Now my advice would be try and get to 40 data points. So if you're a little bit above or a little bit below that, that would be the perfect sample size. Now again, Minitab doesn't recommend this. If I go to DOE Pro recommends the sample size. So it recommends the DOEs, it recommends the sample size. It's giving you advice as well as helping you to conduct your experiment of choice. So we found those on the Minitab menu. Now over here is slightly more complicated, because what I want you to choose now for the modeling DOEs, we're either going to choose a full factorial or I want you to choose the central composite design. So the full factorial is for 2 variables and 3 variables. The central composite is for 4, 5 and 6, and of course screening. You might also, there might be 6 in the screening here as well. So this one gets a little bit more complicated. There's sorts of reasons why you might choose the different DOEs on here, but this is the recommended menu: screening, full factorials and the central composite. Now we know where to find the L18. It's on the Taguchi menu. Where do you find the full factorial? Well, you have to change to a 3-level DOE. That's the first thing. Look, so change the little radio button down, then put in 2 factors or put in 3 factors, and you go to designs and it gives you the choice. Okay, so there's the choice. But where do I find the central composite? Now unfortunately the central composite is not considered to be a factorial design. It's not testing all the combinations like this thing is here, so it's not a factorial design. So you have to go find the central composite in something called the response surface menu. So now look, stat, DOE, response surface. Go to that menu. Select the number of variables, 4, 5 and 6. And then once you've selected, we'll select 4 variables in this case, 4 factors. I'll go to designs. And now you can see it's offering me the central composite design. Now why isn't this just in a straight 3-level menu? The reason being the central composite actually tests in 5 places in reality. So it's a multi-level DOE. It is testing for curvature, which is fantastic. It's a very efficient way, so rather than going, because a full factorial here, I think is 81, would be 81 tests, whereas in point of fact, I think the actual central composite is only going to be 20 tests. So it's more efficient. It's a much more efficient pattern, the central composite. But it's testing at 5 points. It's more difficult to find. Now this recommended set of DOEs I got from the people that taught me design of experiments. You can see this slide here. There is a graphic, and this is the recommended approach. So it says on the left hand side of the graphic 2-level DOEs, on the right hand side of the graphic 3-level DOEs. It comes from this textbook here, Understanding Industrial Designed Experiments. You can buy it for £5 second hand off Amazon. I would recommend that you do that. These are the people that created this DOE Pro. These are the people that cut all the crap out and gave you a recommended list of fantastic practical DOEs. And this graphic is in the back of their textbook. Okay, so that's where I got the recommended list from. It's only a matter of about what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a matter of about 10 different experiments. That's the recommended list, as opposed to giving you complete choice on Minitab, where there's 300, 400, 500 different DOEs. They don't give you any advice. That's the trouble with Minitab. It gives you choice, it doesn't give you advice. But that's where you can find these DOEs. That's the recommended list of DOEs. Go use them. Go learn fantastic things about your processes and about your systems, and ultimately you'll just make bucket loads of cash.